So good morning, good afternoon. So we're going to begin this session on emerging opportunities for energy storage in the Iberian Peninsula. And as you know, this is now Portugal and Spain have become a huge market for renewables in the next decade. In agreement with the PNIECs, or the national plans for renewable energy development, and the climate, I think they call it environment and climate. And one of the things that needs to be addressed in both markets is the issue of energy storage and grid services. And this is what we're talking about here today. As you know, this has cost a lot of opportunities, a lot of people looking into this market. However, we still have some legislation to come. So we're going to discuss the opportunities going forward with two experts in the topic, and I'd like to introduce them now. I'd like to ask them to introduce themselves, actually. So Michael, could you please unmute your microphone and introduce yourself?
Hi, good morning, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you, Belen, and thank you to the ATA team for having us here. So my name is Michael Salomon. I've been running a company called Clean Horizon since I started it 11 years ago, and we have been since the start an expert consultant in energy storage. We really define ourselves as a one-stop shop consultant, meaning we will take any question as long as they're related to storage.
Imagine you were doing 11 years ago storage already, you know, that's not bad, or battery storage. All right, Christophe, please, I'd like to ask you to introduce yourself as well.
Hello, everybody. Christophe Desplarudier. I've been with Neoen for the last 4 years. Neoen, who is a worldwide IPP present in solar, wind, and storage. And I'm delighted to be with all of you today.
Thank you very much. So guys, okay, so there is a lot happening right now in the Iberian Peninsula market and a lot of opportunities. We can't wait to hear about your experience and about, you know, a little bit more about energy storage. I'm going to ask Michael to please unmute your microphone, to prepare your screen. And whilst Michael does that, welcome everyone. We usually have a very international crowd. I'm based in Madrid, and Michael and Christophe, I think they're both in France. But I can see there are people from everywhere. You know, I can see even people from Egypt, Barcelona, places in Albania. So welcome everyone. And I would also like to tell you that we are recording the session. So you will have access to these recordings after. You can review them, okay? You will have access to the materials, and Michael and Christophe usually will put a way to communicate with them if you like to in the presentation, okay? And just one note about questions. We will take questions after the two presentations, and please send your questions through the Q&A box at the bottom, in the toolbar at the bottom, because if you send them by the chat, they can get lost really easily, you know, as people comment. So just make sure that you send them through the Q&A so that we can actually manage them appropriately at the end. So without further ado, Michael, I can see your screen perfectly.
All
so
right. Okay.
To you.
Very good. So as long as you can see my screen, see me and hear me, I think we're good to go. So once again, you know, very happy to be here virtually today. As I mentioned earlier, Clean Horizon is a consultancy only working on storage. We basically work, just to expand a little bit on that market, on that one-stop shop concept. We are a market analyst and a technical consultant. I think, to my knowledge, we're the only one in the field globally to have this dual capability. As Belen mentioned, we're based in Paris. At the end of the presentation, I'll leave you our contacts, but we also have a small office in in Miami, sorry, from where we, yeah, it's almost there, from where we deal with Latin America, which we see as a growth market really for storage. But I think that the purpose today will really be to discuss Spain and Portugal. I had a quick look at the few people that mentioned their names or where they're from. So it's I'm not sure. It seems like we have people both interested in the Spanish and the Portuguese market. What I'm going to do today is I'm going to present. You know, we're just going to speak for 10 or 15 minutes. So I encourage you to ask questions to me and Christophe after this, and you'll have our contacts anyways, or at least my contacts, and I'll be happy to take on any question. What I want to say today is that I'm going to be talking about two very close, very similar, and yet very different countries. In one sentence, so wake up now. It's 10 a.m. CET. All of you should be awake. The ones listening from Asia is probably later in the day, but I'll say something for 30 seconds, and after this you can go back to sleep and go take your coffee. It's fine. One thing I want to say is Spain is, I would say, a huge future opportunity for storage in Europe. It's not a present opportunity right now, although it's changing super fast, and I'll disclose that. Portugal is a small opportunity, but it's a small opportunity for absolutely this very month because we have a tender open right now for PV plus storage. So depending on whether you're here for the long run, you should listen to the next 5 minutes. If you're here for the short run, you should go take your coffee now and come back in 5 minutes when I talk about Portugal. Is that right? Am I helping you guys manage your time? It's fine. That's that. All right. So first
Just
thing.
stay for the whole duration.
Yes. No. I mean, I know we have a shorter attention span because of the COVID crisis, and we have those screens all day long. So I'm just going to, narrow it down to the 5-minute block, really. Okay, so, I don't want to bore people with details and high-level numbers on the Spanish market. I'm just going to say, I'm just going to give you that slide just to remind you that if you look at Spain today from, satellite there that only looks at storage, you won't see much. We have a database whereby we track, it's called CHESS. We track every megawatt level storage projects in the world. We have about 1,300 of those projects in the world. There's barely a dozen in Spain. And by the way, they're all on that slide. But that doesn't matter. The picture on that slide doesn't matter. What matters is what I wrote in red. The rest is all bullshit. What matters is what's in red. Basically, Spain is the only country in Europe that has a national target, specifically focusing on storage and excluding pump hydro. So that country, in its national energy and climate plan, which is essentially a document every European nation has to prepare, and which essentially sets its renewable targets. With the goal to be carbon neutral by 2050, whatever. But so their target there in that document is supposed to be redone every year. And that document for Spain states that Spain is looking to have a target of 2.5 gigawatt of storage in the country by 2030. And again, that excludes pump hydro. So it focuses on battery, CSP, and hydrogen. And no other country in Europe as such has this kind of quantitative target. So what that tells you is that it's something's going to happen. Why? Because as any stakeholder involved in the Spanish market knows, it's not possible to run a business case for storage in Spain right now. What I'll show, as in a nutshell, I apologize that there's a lot of words, so my recommendation is don't read, listen, and you can get the slides afterwards. But that's, I would say, the epitome of our market research on Spain in one slide. So basically, the only thing that you can do with Spain, with a battery, now I'm just focusing on battery in Spain to make money, is a secondary reserve. It's nice, it pays well, except that it's not authorized for you to do it, to go on this market with a storage asset. So even though you can make, as I mentioned here, north of 100,000 euros per megawatt per year, which is more than enough to have a nice IRR, you're not allowed. There's no real rule for you to go on this market as of today. It will change in the future in the context of the European program called Picasso, who's basically dedicated to harmonizing secondary reserve all across Europe. And by the way, which will be delayed in Spain as opposed to other countries, but still, voilà, it shows that this country delivers inherent value to secondary reserve for storage, although unfortunately it's not possible to do it today. You can do it, you can pay the consultants, please pay the consultants, just pay the consultants. But you know what, if you really don't want to do that, here's the answer that any decent one should give you, is that if you go and try to do some arbitrage on the wholesale market, I'm not talking anymore about the secondary reserve market, you'll never have a spread that justifies investing in a battery as of today. So those numbers are essentially the average. It's the average day-ahead price curve for Spain in 2019, meaning we took the average for each hour of the day, the average price during the year. I hope you follow what I'm saying. But basically, that spread here between 53 and 45 euros is way too low to justify buying a battery. Now, the other thing I want to say on Spain, I just mentioned earlier in my nice color graph that, well, the only thing that seems to make sense is secondary reserve. You know, my analyst and I asked him, he's a young guy, so I asked him to make a research there, and he scratched his head and tried to get some data with that ping databases. So he put that together. We're talking about Spain, so bear with me with a minute and I'll tell you what this means. This is our assessment, very rough, super rough assessment of the spark spread of a CCGT of a gas turbine in Spain. I'm not so sure we got the right price for the gas there, but it's fine. But what this tells you is every time a gas turbine produces a megawatt hour of energy, their gross margin, which is called a spark spread, is 18.6. Let's call it 18 euros per megawatt hour. So why does that matter to us? It matters to us because, and I think Christophe will mention it later in his presentation, as opposed to a lot of other countries in the world and in Europe, Spain and Portugal, by the way, don't have a market for frequency regulation, also sometimes called FCR in Europe, for frequency control. The way this works is it's a mandatory, it's an obligation that is set upon the generators to deliver that service, which means, in other words, that when you're generating, if you have a generating asset like a CCGT, a gas plant, you're not able to use it 100% of its capacity. And so with our small computation there, what we're saying is every time, for every hour of the year where I'm not using all of my megawatts, so if I need to save to set 1 megawatt aside for primary reserve, my opportunity cost, the amount of energy the amount of money I'm not making, is the spark spread that I'm not generating, and that's 18 euros per megawatt per hour. If you multiply this by all of the hours in the year, again, you're north of 100,000 euro per megawatt per year, which should be enough, largely enough to pay for a battery. Now, it's unclear, to be quite frank, if there's an actual potential for an independent owner to go to somebody who owns a thermal plant and offer that service. But it doesn't really matter at this stage. We'll discuss in 2 minutes that the market is opening up. What this tells us is those price levels, those opportunity costs are high enough to tell us that there's some value that storage could bring to the market. As a matter of fact, so I mentioned earlier that, okay, Spain has that target, very aggressive target. It's not possible to make a business case today, but clearly, both if you look at the way the money that is being dispersed by this country for secondary reserve, and I would say the hidden cost of frequency regulation, we understand there's some value there, and we also understand that it's not possible to, it doesn't seem possible to effectively address them because the regulations don't follow. We're not the only ones to know that. The government of Spain knows that. And as a matter of fact, the government issued a public consultation that just closed just after the end of the state of health emergency there, just closed a couple of weeks ago. We as consultants responded to this consultation. And the purpose of this consultation was really to ask stakeholders in the Spanish market, about what should be done to foster energy storage markets within this country. Voilà, and there's other let's say small data points there that are written in the slides that tell you that I guess the market is aware of that. Another key data point which came up just last week after I finished my slides today. So to be quite frank, I have not had the time to fully analyze it. There's a new royal decree that was issued. I think it was just at the end of June, really just about a week ago. Providing some insights on specifically on storage and on how the business model for storage should start looking like. So as of today, July 8th, 2020, if you go to your favorite banker and ask him or her for a loan to build a storage project in Spain, clearly you won't be able to show to this person an actual mechanism or market mechanism that justifies that you get that loan. Okay, so as of really today, it's difficult to build this business case, but because of the values that I've mentioned, and also because we understand the government has this target and is right now changing the rules, this is going to change. I don't think I can make it any clearer. So you're looking at here potentially the biggest market for storage in Europe, and which is right now changing. That was for the future, and as promised, I'm going to talk about the present. The present is now Portugal. The present is now Portugal. Before I get into too much, before I get into, the detail of what's happening in the present, I just want to say one thing is that I would say the overall conclusion I had on Spain. You remember that table that I showed with the two markets in orange, one in yellow, and one in green. Well, I could be doing the same thing for Portugal. Let's say simple reason is the two markets are coupled, very well coupled, by the way, and so I would probably be. And what I'm showing here, the graph I'm showing here, is as the capacity payment that I get if I'm making what's called a double bid. I'm happy to explain the questions, but let's say if I'm offering a secondary reserve capacity to this country for the whole year of 2019. Again, as you'll see, I will be paid 16 euro per megawatt per hour. Again, multiply this by the number of hours in the year. You're almost in the same range as what you had in Spain, which was 140,000 euro per megawatt per year. Now, again, same as in Spain, the best thing we can say as consultants is to be participating as of today in Portugal with a storage asset in the secondary reserve is unclear. I wrote the rules are fuzzy, which means it's unclear. Also, but same story as in Spain, it is going to change because of the Picasso project that is specifically aiming at integrating the way secondary reserve is operating in Europe with a target of 2022, which has been postponed to 2023 and 2024 in Portugal. So the value is there, the rules are not there, but it's going to change. So why the hell am I talking about a short-term opportunity? Wait for a minute. The one thing where I'm getting at is even though it's a small country, I mean, in terms of electricity, the overall consumption for Portugal in I think 2019 was just about 50 terawatt hour. So it's not the same weight as Spain, really. Nevertheless, this country is pretty much aiming at multiplying by 5 its amount of PV capacity before the end of the decade. As a matter of fact, last year, a lot of you may know that Portugal issued an auction for PV where more than 1 gigawatt of storage was awarded to a dozen developers, and the cheapest, it was a very cheap number, the cheapest one of those developers for their cheapest project won the tender with less than 15 euro per megawatt hour. Good for the Portuguese, I'm not sure it's so good for them, but whatever, I guess they're grown-ups and they know what they do. The reason I'm talking about short-term is among their PV target, this country is issuing right now an auction for now 700 megawatt of PV with a storage option, which I will discuss in a minute. This is the high level in this slide, which you can make a screenshot of and also download after the discussion. I would say the high level bullet points for this tender. The sticky point is the deadline for application is this month, meaning you don't have to submit your full application by the end of the month. But you need to specify, to make some very specific, I would say critical choices before the end of the month, and I'll tell you what those choices are. In this tender, now bear with me with a minute, I have 2 more slides to show, and I want to explain that tender and why it should be considered, it may well be extremely relevant to focus on storage for this tender. The way this is organized is it's a PV tender with a storage option. So we, as storage experts, know that a PV tender with a storage option is usually not serious on storage. It's usually meaning that whoever is creating the tender just wants to get a free market information on storage and will never buy, because in the end, when they receive the options, they will realize it's more expensive, and then they won't buy, and they will just stick to the PV only options. Those of you that have been exposed to the US market, know that is for a fact. I mean, you just don't waste time on PV options, except on that one. The way the standard is made is either you bid with PV only, that's bidding options 1 and 2, where essentially you just have to choose how you're going to be assessed. Either you you provide them with the PPAs, that's option 1, and you provide them with some kind of a discount to a specific tariff target they're setting on themselves. Or number 2, the second way for you to bid your PV is, no, you can bid and you can go on the market whose prices are projected to rise. But if you go on the market, you have to provide a fee, an annual fee to the system, essentially to the electricity system. Third option is you can bid with storage, in which case what you have, the way this works is they'll give you an annual payment per megawatt connected, and they'll also give you a strike price and they'll let you sell your energy on the market with a strike price, meaning when the price of energy is higher than the strike price, you need to pay them the difference. The rationale they have for storage, which is not the same as for PV only, is they just want to use the PV plus storage to avoid very high peak prices. Now, how they're going to compare those 3 options is they're going to assess the NPV, the net present value of all of the options, all of those those bids, whatever the option, the bidding option chosen, and they're going to assess the NPV of this option from the point of view of the electricity system, and they will select the ones that provide the lowest NPV, so the most savings from the electricity system. They're pretty transparent on how they make the computation. That there's a small calculator on their website, so it's pretty open. And the good news is they're not just comparing capex and cost of energy, in which case PV plus storage loses by construction, but they're computing how much you're saving their system, and they're giving you the rules on how to assess that. So we think it's quite interesting for storage, and voilà. And so now I guess the devil will be in the detail. The difficulty will be if you want to, as a bidder, you're going to have to assess those 3 options and assess which one delivers the lowest NPV. To assess the third option is hard work. I mean, we have been working and developing a lot of the optimization codes to allow our clients really to assess what's the lowest NPV they can offer the electric system of Portugal, and then so that they can compare with the PV on the options. There's a lot of refined details. I mentioned earlier that secondary reserve is an interesting pocket of value. It's not open as of today, but it doesn't matter because those projects will have to be connected in 2024. And if you remember what I just said about the Picasso project, which should be operational in Portugal for 2023 or 2024, then you understand that you may be right in the money, and that you need to be thinking really out of the box on how that storage asset is going to monetize itself on this market. So I don't want to increase the amount of complexity there, but if you take a step back and remembering what I said earlier in this presentation, welcome to the Iberian Peninsula, where depending on where you want, either who you are and what you want, you can either start doing business freaking yesterday because you have until the end of the month to bid. And by the way, it is a serious tender with 700 megawatt of PV and most likely a lot of storage. And while you're at it, if you invest in this geography, bear in mind that just next door, there is this awakening behemoth called Spain, which is probably going to become the hottest market for energy storage in the, I don't know, 1 or 2 years to come, to be defined. So I'm just going to, shy away now and maybe shut up. Is that good? Should I do that?
Thank you very much, Michael. You're also really funny. I think we're all like laughing in our offices. Right? Yeah. Thank you very much.
Is that right?
All right, guys, this was a very, Michael makes it entertaining, but it is very detailed presentation. So don't worry, you'll have access to the materials. We will ask Michael to send them our way. And I can see there's a few questions already popping up, so we'll deal with those after Christoph. So Christoph, please, could you share your screen?
Yes.
Go for it. I also have some questions for you guys, and I think Michael has hit right on the nail on the head. It is that really, like, we're on the brink of a massive market here, but just on the brink, you know. So how, when, you know, like, it kind of becomes something more concrete, it still remains to be seen.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, and we can see your presentation now. So perfect, you're ready to go.
Good. Thank you very much. So just as a quick introduction, so what I proposed to Michael when we discussed this webinar a few days ago was, as today Neoen hasn't got any storage asset in Portugal, and for the reason that Michael presented before, and I would be more than happy to explain more in detail. I would say 2 words about Neoen, who we are, what we do worldwide. I think that storage is key for us, so I would be more than happy to explain the main reason for and the main driver of our business model for storage. And then I will explain why we believe that Portugal is an interesting market, and I will give you example about what we do worldwide. And as Michael and Ben said, I'm more than happy to respond to any question at the end. So very quickly about Neoen, we're an IPP in the renewable energy sector. We're working 3 technos, which are solar, wind, and storage. We are present in 14 countries in the world, and we have more than 200 employees worldwide. We have 7 people in the Lisbon office, and Portugal is an important country for us. It's our first country internationally after France, and we opened the office in 2010. Just few figures. Today, Neoen has 2 gigawatts of solar assets in construction or operation worldwide, almost 1 gigawatt of wind, and 185 megawatts of storage, I think, which make us one of the leaders in storage worldwide. Few words about Portugal. So as I said, we are present in Portugal since 2010. We have a portfolio of operating assets of 24 megawatt operating since 2014. So actually we participated to the auction, which was, I think, in 2012 and 2013, which was based on fixed tariff also. And I think that at that time, 10 years ago or 9 years ago, the tariff was almost 10 times the tariff it was at the last auction, which is quite interesting looking at the price of the solar decreasing. During the last tender in 2019, we've been awarded for 50 megawatt for 15 years, and we have chosen at that time the fixed price. So there were three as Michael said, this year there are 3 possibilities. Last year there were only 2, and we decided to go for the fixed price, which is a revenue in euro per megawatt paid by the government. We will be participating to the auction this year again. We have a strong pipeline in Portugal, and we are looking forward in doing storage in Portugal. So we are still assessing, and we had several discussions with Michael about that, still assessing what are the best options for us to go. I think it's not straightforward for sure. I think there are different things to consider. There is the sizing of the battery, which seems to be at least 20% of the size of the solar plant, which is something which is
Hi, Christoph. You had a bad patch there. Can you hear us?
and we want to.
Yeah, you're right. We cannot hear you, Christoph. Let's see. Okay, maybe now. Can you hear us?
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yeah, now we can. Yes.
Okay. When should I start again? Where should I start again?
You went off for a while, so don't worry. Just keep going. Michael, did you? Yeah, there. Start there. Why considering storage?
Okay.
This is good. This is good.
Did you hear about Portugal? What I said about Neoen in Portugal?
Yes, we heard that. We heard your two
heard that.
options. We heard your 50 megawatts, and you heard that. We heard that what you said about it being not clear what should be the bidding option. And we by the way, while you were talking, we also received questions on this, so we'll deal with them later. So that part we got.
Cool.
Okay, good. Sorry about that. So why are we considering storage? The issue that we have found with renewable is intermittency, is the fact that we need to provide more security to the electrical grid due to intermittency, and I think that storage can also avoid new investment to the grid. Because by adding storage to the grid can enhance the grid and therefore enhance the capacity that can be delivered on the grid by increasing, let's say, the number of megawatt hour injected full time. So our main usage as today, and the main services that Neoen is delivering with batteries is firstly grid services, by being present to such market as FCR that was mentioned by Michael earlier today. So that is the main use of our batteries, grid services. We are doing also and assessing load shifting. We believe that one of the main storage use is load shifting, and then energy arbitrage is for sure something that we are looking at in all the geography where we are present. Nevertheless, for us today, energy arbitrage is not a huge opportunity in all the countries. So I think there was a good case explained by Michael in Spain. So we believe that energy arbitrage will provide more opportunities in the future with more renewable. But as today, let's say that the main driver of our business model for battery is grid services. Just very quickly to go through our asset worldwide. So as today we have 6 assets in operation. We have 3 in Australia actually. One which is with solar and 2 with wind. 1 in France. And then 1 in Salvador, in Central America, where we're also doing grid services. I'm going to talk very quickly about Hansdale. I am sure that everybody knows about this one. It's a project that has been installed by Tesla. So Neoen is the owner and Tesla is the EPC provider and has been providing the battery for Hansdale Power Reserve. I think that what is interesting about the special feature of the project is that we are receiving an annual income from the South Australian government as part of the grid protection protocol, and I think that that's the main reason why this battery has been promoted by the South Australian government, because of the intermittency issue with the renewable, and we are also bidding on the energy market for several frequency control markets, which are part of them are frequency regulation. What is interesting in terms of impact of Hansdale Power Reserve in Australia and in the South Australia is that during the first year, it has provided a saving to the state of around 40 million Australian dollars, which is around 75% of the frequency regulation cost. So I think that's really high numbers, and that is one of the reasons we have decided to increase the size of this battery. That has been done with the cooperation of the South Australian government, and this is also addressing another issue, but I won't go too much into detail of it, but just to mention it, which is about inertia. that only huge battery can provide. Then I will just briefly mention the last our last development in Europe. So our last development in Europe is I believe one of the largest battery in Europe actually, but the largest unit in the Nordics. It's Yllikkälä Power Reserve in Finland. This battery is currently in construction. We hope to have it operating by Q1 2021. It's a 30 megawatt hour. And so the use of this battery will be frequency regulation. So in the Nordics, there is a market for frequency regulation. I'm not saying that we won't use this battery for other services or for arbitrage later on, but as today, it is the main use of this battery. And I think that Fingrid, who is a grid operator in Finland, has been helping us to develop the battery because of the services provided to the grid and because of the impact it will have for renewable in the country by helping them to deal with intermittency of the renewable sector. So I think that's mostly what I wanted to say. I am really happy to answer to any question. I've been asked to be quite short. Thank you.
Ben, am I allowed to say one thing?
No, absolutely. Yes. Shall we take this off the screen for now so that we can see you better? Okay. Go ahead, Michael.
Okay. So I want to I know we have dozens of people listening, but I think what Christophe mentions is I'm going to paraphrase what he did. It's extremely important. So you have that on your screen sitting there, clearly one of the leading persons at one of the, if not the leading IPP globally in terms of storage, clearly. And what this guy is telling you is that the way he does storage is when he is in a country and he serves the grid. So he needs, and he showed that in Australia, he just showed that in Finland, he delivers the services to the grid that storage is the best at delivering, which is frequency regulation. He also mentioned inertia, which is yet another topic, but essentially that's what he's doing. But that guy is also saying, and by the way, I have PV plants in Portugal, and yes, as an auction, of course, I'm considering it. So the challenge that this guy is facing, sorry, Christophe, I'm mentioning you as this guy. The challenge that Christophe is, I'm trying to make it generic. The challenge that this guy is facing is that here's a country where the usual way to do storage business is not on the map yet, okay? And yet there's an open tender. I'm talking about Portugal here. There's an open tender now that is specifically asking people like him and others maybe like you to make a strategic decision on how to address the market. So you're not alone. The challenge that the opportunity / challenge that Portugal, that the Portuguese operator is asking the storage community to solve is not a trivial one. It's something, I guess, very specific to this country. But as I tried to mention in my talk, you can measure that this country has hidden that there's intrinsic value that storage could generate to this country, because a lot of the way it's operating its reserve at least is costly. So voilà. So the reason we had a discussion there about Australia and Finland is just to tell you that as a mirror example, the usual way to do it in the leading markets is going to have to be adapted to Portugal.
Yeah.
Voilà. And I think we got some questions there.
We do have some questions. So Christophe, what about Spain? When are you going into Spain? We have a clear idea of what is your idea for Portugal, but what about Spain? This is my own question, by the way, but I think it's important. One of the leading, IPPs.
No, so few things about that. Firstly, we entered in Portugal in 2010. We want to enhance our position, to increase our position in Portugal. We believe the Portuguese market is an interesting market, and which will give us the opportunity, because maybe it's also smaller than Spain, to be one of the strong renewable energy developer in the country, one of the big IPP, and it's important for us also to be one of the major IPP of a given country. We believe that by being one of the major IPP in a given country, it helps us also to have a discussion with the grid, to explain what we're doing elsewhere. I think that what Michael said about the fact that the main purpose of storage for us is really service to the grid. And that is why we decided to go to Portugal, and we want to strengthen our position in Portugal. Now, responding to your question about Spain, we assessed the market several times. We believe it's a huge market, an interesting market. I think that we have some question about how the market will evolve. The market is heating up a bit too much these last 2 years, so that's a question mark for us. And secondly, we believe that there are very strong IPP already present in Spain, and we don't know how we could have a strong place how we were having in other geography. So let's say that it's not a reason because we don't want to go to Spain. It's more a reason of how would we position ourselves in Spain if we were going to Spain, and I think we don't have the response yet.
Yeah, there's much to come. I mean, for what it's worth, a new royal decree should, start structuring the market a little bit better. Remains to be seen, but we'll see in September, October, once the sort of the short-term deadlines have run out, what happens there. Okay, Michael, you had a bunch of questions that you wanted to answer, that people sent.
Yes,
you want to go through those?
I don't know.
You're pretty independent and so or would you like me to ask them? Look, I can ask them.
Okay.
The value of the secondary band/energy market is for sure important in both Portugal and Spain, but it is impossible for a battery with limited storage to be able to capture the full value of the market. Yes. How do you address this long term?
Okay, it's a good question. Yes. So you have a hourly obligation. So in those markets, let me essentially you have a hourly obligation to deliver the service, right? So you make an hourly auction. So to make it very simple, I'm going to assume the recommendations of the Picasso European rules are adopted. So we're 2 or 3 years in the future. And then basically what's going to happen is, yes, for sure, you have a limited energy reservoir in the battery, but the way this market will evolve, it will be towards 15-minute blocks. It will be a 15-minute market, right? And so even I think even as it is today, you can bid, I think, on a hour-by-hour basis. So I mean, worst comes to worst, if you're afraid that your battery will run out, so here's my bidding strategy for you. Just bid every odd hours, right? And in case you're being activated for one of that odd hours, it's fine. Just go to the intraday market essentially and recharge at the even hours. Of course, you don't want to make it as stupid as what I just said, but essentially you get out of it by you get out of the fact that you have a limited energy reservoir, which does not allow you to provide the reserve for a long duration by just being on the market for not continuous hours. Let's put it this way, you should just have a 1-hour battery.
Okay, we have a lot of questions, so I'm gonna keep pressing. Okay, you guys.
Okay.
It's open to the two of you, so whenever you want to, just let us know. So, okay, one question here is, what is your opinion about PV plus CSP plus thermal storage? There's a lot going on of that, retrofitting some CSP plants that didn't have storage at the time, but they could have it.
Yes. You want to do that, Christophe, or you want me to do
No,
that?
I think I prefer, I'll let you this question. We're not doing CSP.
You pass because I was going to pass. So, okay. There's also another question here for longer duration storage. Look, this is all nice. There's another question later for 6-hour storage. This is great. This is wonderful. I just don't know. It's just a matter of economics. Can you make it cheaper? If you make it cheaper, it goes through. If you don't make it cheaper, it don't go through. That's about it. And so last time I checked, it was a while ago. I haven't looked myself, and Belen knows that I have this failure in my usual curriculum is that the last time I checked on prices for CSP was about 2 years ago. So I don't think I have fresh numbers to
I can
ship.
tell you 7.3, and the DWA project is
7.3 what cents?
Yeah, cents. Yeah, kilowatt hour is it or?
Okay. Well, to be discussed. So
it's actually a battery. It only works at night. It's the one in Dubai, so it works from 6 p.m. when the sun goes down to 10 a.m. something like that. It's like counteracting the PV.
6 p.m.
So
to 10
it's actually cheaper than gas in.
So it's a semi-base load. It's a semi-base load essentially.
Yeah, I mean, it's not.
73.
It works at night, 15 hours.
Oh,
It really depends on the need, isn't it?
Look,
but I mean, what you have to bear in mind, though, Michael, is that here you have the best part of 1.5 gigas, or maybe not as much, 1.25 gigas of CSP projects that don't have storage, but that could very cheaply, add storage and PV. You see what I mean?
Once you have the storage, once you have the CSP, adding the thermal storage is not so much of an issue financially. But that number that you give, by the way, that 72 cents. So we did some math now applied to France. I'm just going to sum it up. So if you take the PV cost in France and the wind cost in France, and I think we made a price where we assumed we were in 2025. So assuming the PV capex was a little down, the wind capex was a little down, and storage capex, lithium-ion capex was a little down. Essentially, we were able to say we can deliver 24/7 baseload, PV plus wind plus storage at the level of the country. Our analysis was to avoid the building of new nuclear. Because in France, they're thinking of building 10 gigawatts of nuclear. I mean, you may not care, but when we die, you die too, because it's the same nuclear meltdown that you guys get.
Yeah, plus you guys are blocking us in the European markets. You got to stop that.
Yeah, whatever. No, wait. So we said that we looked at essentially transforming the intermittent renewable into baseload with lithium-ion was essentially an adder of about 40 euros per megawatt hour, so 4 cents. So, which means that we're able with lithium-ion to deliver full renewable baseload at about 85 or 86 euro per megawatt hour, and that's with existing technology. So we've made other assessments with new technologies that don't exist yet, so it was even cheaper. But so that number, it depends how you see it. It's very expensive because it's twice the market price. I mentioned earlier in my slides, take the market price in Spain is 40, 50, whatever. But on the other hand, we're talking here about full 100% nuclear, 400% full renewable baseload. And so now when you get to those numbers, you can start comparing with what you get from CSP. Essentially what I'm saying is you can convert intermittent PV and wind to baseload PV and wind, and what you have to pay, taking everything into account and all the thing is an adder of 40 euros per megawatt hour. Now, when you compare, for example, to France, when we are selling PPAs of nuclear to Great Britain, there's a famous plant there called Hinkley Point. The PPA is at 105 euro per megawatt hour. So voila.
It's 155. 155. Huh? Is it one of the most expensive?
No, 105 euro per megawatt hour. Yes, the Hinkley Point PPA. But whatever, it's very expensive. And the reason we have such cheap price in our market in France is because we have nuclear, yes, and it's amortized, and it was essentially paid for by EDF when it was a state-owned company, so it was paid by taxes essentially. So that's why, and now it's paid for by taxes, so it's paid for by the community, and it's amortized. So now, of course, the marginal price is very low. But that doesn't happen. That when you have to renew the fleet, which is going to happen in France, you change the paradigm. And this is now we should start asking questions about, can we deliver baseload with CSP? Can we deliver baseload with PV plus wind plus storage, with battery storage and whatever? But that's completely off topic. Apologize.
Yeah. It's also like CSP is more dispatchable than baseload at times, but it depends how you approach it. But anyway, there's so many more questions. With the last bids in mind, the amount of price level and the size of the Portuguese market, would you still see it as an interesting market? Julia asks. Last bids were really low, I think. 1.4, wasn't it? Yeah.
So maybe I can respond to this one. So we do believe that Portugal is an interesting market. So So I think one of the reasons also is that we can see that Portugal is looking at storage, which is a key for us. We believe that we don't know if the approach in doing storage is completely the right one through a tender, but we believe that at least they are thinking about it, and that is to promote more renewable. So that's a really good point from what we do believe. Secondly, we believe that in Portugal there are still opportunities to when you look at the price of the modules, going down. When you look at the some connection costs which are quite low, we believe ourselves that there are still opportunities, and so we haven't been the one bidding at 14.7. Maybe 14.7 is a bit low, but last year we've been awarded at 23.5. And I can say that with 23.5, we are targeting, we are reaching a target RRR, and we believe that it's still interesting to be in a market where you have long-term PPA, because you have 15 years. There are not so many places where you still have 15 years, which can provide you also to cheap financing. And then after it, you still have a market price for 10 years or 15 years, depending on how long you look at your business model.
Good point. Okay, there is a follow-up on that, and is, would you expect that the rules of the Portuguese auction could be adopted in the Spanish market? Maybe this, I'll let Michael.
No clue. Don't know.
Julia, I am not so confident, but then, it's just an opinion.
Julia, by the way, is asking 50% of the questions, FYI.
Well, that's because she's interested, right? Someone here asks if you see
I'm
the
typing a question
chain...
for you, Julia. I'm typing an answer for you. Well, okay.
Michael, how do you see the supply chain of battery energy storage systems in Portugal and Spain? Are these largely Chinese driven? This is a good question.
Okay.
Because now with the COVID things, with the manufacturing in China.
Okay.
I don't know how things are going to end up in there.
So the question is who's okay, so there's no real difference for Portugal versus the rest of the world, because as of today, Portugal is not a storage market. So what I can say is the value chain has been very often the following. The system integrators tend to be international, even local companies. I mean, who are the key system integrators? There's a Nidec, there's a GE, there's Vartila. Okay, usually US or European companies addressing our markets. But then what they do, so what those guys do is they build the whole system, and they provide a turnkey PC contract to people like Christophe. But the batteries themselves are usually, except Tesla, which tends to manufacture its own batteries, but does not even do it all the time, by the way, as we know from Hornsdale, by the way, and other places. But at least in general, other companies manufacture the batteries. The leaders in the recent past were the Koreans, were Samsung and LG. Clearly, for many reasons that are maybe, which I'm happy to detail if you want to. They didn't push too hard on our market. They pushed harder in the EV market, and they were, I would say, the Chinese companies such as the CATL, for example, are have been very aggressive. And if you look now at the offers you receive from European and US system integrators, a lot of them now will propose an option not to integrate LG batteries, but to integrate CATL batteries. So, voilà. Bon, but also even at some point, LG and Samsung were also building some of their batteries in China. So that value chain always has had a Chinese component. Now, with the effect of the COVID, I'm not sure. Actually, China is now almost a COVID-free country. I mean, it's everywhere else. So the COVID situation is more stringent on our end than on their side, really.
So we only have about 4 minutes. So Michael, I'm going to ask you to, instead of just answer them live, but there is a couple here that is interesting. Zacharias and that says literally, it prequels with the COVID, blah, blah, blah. And it says the actual PPAs are already burdensome for many countries. So what makes you think, that the countries, especially in the MENA region, would actually continue with this route of PPAs? It's a question mark as well, what's going to happen in Spain in terms of whether it's going to be PPAs or, what kind of So I don't know, do you think PPAs are here to stay? Do you think this is going to be the method to procure PV plus storage?
Look, I don't know. I absolutely don't know. This is where ideology kicks in. I have no clue. I don't think that. I mean, yes, there's been a drop in electricity demand. There's also then been a drop in electricity prices. So of course, in the market prices in Europe, prices went down. So of course, if you were locked in a PPA, you didn't see that downward price curve. But that's the purpose of a PPA. You lock in a price, so you know when the price goes up, you're not affected also. So as a consumer, I tend to think that we have no choice as a generation really, just to stop toying around with 10% or 20% of our generation coming from renewable. We have to shoot for 70+%. And so maybe 80 or 90 becomes too expensive, so we stay away from this. But there's no doubt that in the next freaking decade, we need to multiply by a factor of 50 how many gigawatt hour are produced by renewables globally. So, but this clear ideology. So I mean, it's more like a political party thing than an expert thing to say.
Right, Marco. So what
Sorry,
other question would you like to answer live? You've been taking a look and answering them and stuff. And the same question to you, Christoph. There's a few still open.
Yeah, maybe on PPA, I would add one thing to what Michael said. What we can see in the Nordics, especially, is that we can see big corporate as GAFAM who are now doing corporate PPAs on long term. And I think that is quite good, because we can see that private companies are now thinking of promoting renewable, because they have this willingness to buy renewable energy, and I think that's also a secondary type of opportunity, which is corporate PPA, and we can see a lot of them in Spain also. We're talking about Spain. There are a lot of corporate PPA in Spain. I think that's really interesting, and that is also promoting renewable. And what we can see, and I was reading an article about Google some time ago, Google is now 100% buying renewable energy, but not 24/7. And I think their target for 2025 or 2030 is to be buying renewable 24/7, which then you need to deal with storage or with sort of base load renewable energy, which is a new challenge, I think. So we can see that there are new opportunities with corporate moving forward.
Michael, what about your question?
Okay, so there's a bunch of questions on the Portuguese tender. So I'm just going to put my email address there, and people can ask them by email, because it's very typical.
You want to get into the specific,
yeah,
right?
it's too specific and etc. And there was one question there that I lost about. There's one technical question from Hector Beltran, who is asking the following question: you cited inertia response or inertia emulation, but did not discuss anything about this potential service. What is your opinion about it, and how can it be delivered? The inertia, okay, so 1 minute, okay, 1 minute. If you move to the world that I mentioned, which is 70+% renewable, issue is you're losing what's called inertia. Inertia is the fact that when you make electricity with a thermal generator, what happens is you have a steel mass that's spinning. And that steel mass delivers inertia, meaning when something happens on the grid, before the frequency drops down, it has to take down the physical inertia of the asset. So it means the grid resists better to a change in generation, and then the frequency doesn't go down too low. Now, when you remove those thermal generators, then you're missing inertia, and you can replace that with a battery. So a battery acts as a synthetic inertia. Why? Because they can react super fast to a small change in frequency. So as opposed to let's see, not letting the frequency change like with inertia, what happens is a battery could sense a delta, a variation in the frequency. So even before it starts moving down more than an epsilon, it engages at full power and then avoids the frequency to go down. That's inertia. So it's usually immensely useful. And you can see it in countries like UK, Italy, any island where Ireland, the country of Ireland, and any island all over the world where the systems are small and they put renewables and their inertia goes down. And UK, Ireland, and Italy now have created specific tenders to buy inertia, synthetic inertia as they call it, from batteries. So yes, it's a key product. It's a key value that storage can deliver. And yes, in smaller markets, it has a value, and that value has been quantified.
Well, thank you very much, Michael. Thank you very much, Christoph. Once again, the details of the speakers will be in the presentation, so don't worry, do get in touch. Michael is more than happy to help you. And on top of that, you get the comedy that goes with it. So, you know, it's always interesting to when you are working and also have fun, right? So thank you very much, both of you. And thank you very much for the people who are also with us. And see you next time.